You're listening to Catholic Family Podcast, Episode 30.
I'm Kevin Davis. Thanks so much for listening to the Catholic Family Podcast. Yes, again, it's been a little while since we've had a show, and today is a very special day for me. I'm a very fortunate guy to be married to the greatest woman I've ever met, the nicest, sweetest, most lovely, most beautiful woman I could possibly ever meet in my life. And I'm very fortunate to get to spend my life with her and get to spend my days with her and our awesome little daughter, Saint Philomena, who is one of her patron saints' feast days today. So that's also a big day. Saint Philomena, one of our patrons, one of the patrons of the modern world. We'll talk a little bit about Saint Philomena in a minute. I do want to introduce my co-host, my wife, who we're celebrating today, our third anniversary. And, I kind of thought, how do I want to spend this day? I'm a little sick, unfortunately, or I have been for a bit. And so you can probably hear that in my voice. So I get to stay home today and wondered how we wanted to spend the day. And I thought, I don't know if I'd want to do anything more than doing a podcast with Ina. So Ina, thank you very much for coming on, and happy anniversary. And I love you.
Thank you. Happy anniversary. I love you too.
And so to start the show, we have several topics we want to talk about, and we're going to kind of talk about Saint Philomena. To start, I'm going to read a story about Saint Philomena, which I found on Facebook earlier today, which I think was a very nice, short recap or sort of synopsis of who she was and what we know about her. I got to try to find that again because now my WhatsApp, of course, is not working. But I'll find that short story about St. Philomena. We want to talk about the last few weeks here in Germany, which have been very consequential. We've had a lot going on, a lot of good things, a few bad things, and I think things that are definitely worth talking about in today's podcast. And then we're going to wrap it up talking a bit about relationships and marriages and how we should feel about modern marriages and modern relationships and modern dating compared to how it was in the past. But first, we're going to honor Saint Philomena on her feast day and read a short story of her life. I found this on Facebook. It has no attribution to the author. In 1802, the remains of a young woman were found in the catacomb of St. Priscilla on the Via Salaria. It was covered by stones, the symbols on which indicated that the body was a martyr named Saint Philomena. An inscription near her tomb read, "Peace be with thee, Philomena," along with drawings of 2 anchors, 3 arrows, and a palm. Near her bones was discovered a small glass vial containing the remains of blood. The bones were exhumed, catalogued, and effectively forgotten, since there was so little known about the person. In 1805, Canon Francis de Lucia of Mugnano, Italy, was in the treasury of the rare collection of Christian antiquity, the Treasury of Relics, in the Vatican. When he reached the relics of St. Philomena, he was suddenly struck with a spiritual joy and requested that he be allowed to enshrine them in a chapel in Mugnano. After some disagreements settled by the cure of Canon Francis following prayers to St. Philomena, he was allowed to translate the relics to Mugnano. Miracles began to be reported at the shrine, including cures of cancer, healing of wounds, and the miracle of Mugnano, in which Venerable Pauline Jericho was cured a severe heart ailment overnight. After hundreds of other miraculous cures, she was beatified in 1837. Philomena became the only person recognized as a saint solely on the basis of miraculous intercession, as nothing historical was known of her except for her name and the evidence of her martyrdom. St. Philomena's history can only be related as it has been revealed by the saint herself to 3 persons. These revelations were made known in answer to the prayers of many of her clients, who had asked the saint to let them know who she was and how she met her martyrdom. According to these revelations, St. Philomena was the daughter of a king of a small Grecian state. Her parents longed for a child, but all their sacrifices and prayers to their pagan gods were of no avail. A Roman doctor, seeing their distress, told them that if they embraced the Christian religion, their prayers would be answered. Then, having studied our holy faith, they had the grace given them to embrace it. And in the following year, a daughter was born to them, whom they named Philomena, which means daughter of light. This child made her first communion when she was 5 years old, and at the age of 11 consecrated herself to Jesus Christ, to whom she had given the love of her innocent heart by a vow of chastity. She was a beautiful girl, and idolized by her parents, who lavished every affection upon her. When Philomena had reached her 13th year, the emperor of Rome threatened to declare an unjust war on their state. Hoping to make peace, her father went to Rome to see the emperor, and as he could not bear his daughter out of his sight, he took her and the queen with him. When the Emperor Diocletian beheld the beautiful princess, who with her mother was present at the interview between him and her father, he told the king not to trouble himself any further, as he would place all the forces of the empire at his disposal on condition that he give him the hand of his fair daughter in marriage. Only too pleased to hear of a way out of their trouble, Philomena's parents gladly accepted this offer, but the child herself refused on account of the vow she had made more than a year previously. Her parents did all in their power to persuade her to fall in with their wishes, but Philomena, assisted by her divine spouse, who gave her the necessary strength, remained faithful to her resolution. On hearing her decision, the emperor, thinking it was only a ruse on her father's part to break faith with him, desired that Philomena should be brought to him, and that he might see what he could do to persuade her. And the king, on going to fetch his daughter to take her to the palace, found that her determination was as strong as ever. He and his wife fell down at her feet, begging her to change her mind, saying, "O daughter, have pity on your parents, have pity on your country, have pity on our kingdom." To which she replied, "My country and my kingdom are heaven. God and my virginity must take precedence of all else." Still, the emperor's orders had to be obeyed, so they presented themselves at the palace, where Diocletian did all in his power to persuade the young princess to marry him, by the means of promises, entreaties, caresses, threats, and dazzling offers, but all in vain. She told him she did not fear him. Then, overcome by anger, he ordered her to be bound hand and foot with heavy chains and thrown into the dungeon under the imperial palace, hoping by this means to compel her to marry him. The emperor visited her every day and repeated his persuasions. All she was allowed during her imprisonment was a little bread and water, the chains being removed while she partook of this simple repast. For 37 days these sufferings lasted, during which time the saintly child recommended herself continually to Jesus and his most holy mother. On the 37th day, Our Lady appeared to her, bearing her divine Son in her arms and surrounded by a brilliant light, and told her that she would remain 3 more days in the dungeon, and then, on the 40th day of her imprisonment, she would leave that place of sorrow. Philomena was overjoyed at hearing this, but the Blessed Mother's next words created a new fear in her heart, and she felt as if she were going through all the agony of dying, for she was told that when she left there, she would undergo cruel torture for the love of Jesus Christ. Then the Queen of Heaven went on speaking words of comfort to the child, telling her that when the moment of trial came, she would receive strength and grace. "Besides your angel guardian," said Our Lady, "you will have at your side the Archangel Gabriel, whose name signifies the strength of the Lord. When I was on earth, he was my protector. I will now send him to her, who is my beloved daughter." After these reassuring words, the vision disappeared, leaving a refreshing perfume lingering in the dungeon. 3 days later, as the Mother of God had foretold, Philomena's tortures began. The emperor ordered her to be tied to a pillar and cruelly scourged. Then, seeing that she still remained faithful to her resolution, he had her thrown back into prison, there to die in agony. Philomena was looking forward to dying, so that she might rest in the bosom of her heavenly spouse. But God sent 2 angels to comfort her, who, pouring heavenly balms on her terrible wounds, completely restored her to health. On hearing the news of her recovery the next morning, the emperor was more than astonished. He then did all he could again to persuade her to give herself to him, saying that she owed her cure to Jupiter, who destined her for an imperial diadem. But being inspired by the Holy Ghost, Philomena once more resisted all his persuasions and rejected his offer. Then, more furious than ever, her persecutor ordered an iron anchor to be tied around her neck, and commanded that she should be thrown into the river Tiber, to be drowned and lost to sight. But once again the angels were sent to assist her, who, cutting the cord, carried her back to the bank, without a drop of water having touched her clothes, much to the astonishment and admiration of the bystanders, several of whom were converted on seeing this miracle. The emperor, more blind and obstinate than Pharaoh, commanded that she should be dragged through Rome as a sorceress and shot with arrows. This done, she was for the second time cast dying into her prison cell, but instead of death, God sent her a health-giving sleep, from which she awoke more beautiful than ever. Mad with rage, the tyrant ordered the torture to be repeated until death should claim her, but the arrows refused to leave tile bows of the archers. Diocletian, declaring her to be a witch, then ordered the arrows to be heated red hot, but God once more worked a miracle for his little champion, and turned the arrows back on the executioners, a number of whom were killed. The last miracle brought about more conversions, and fearing still more serious consequences, the wicked emperor ordered the child martyr to be quickly beheaded. So at 3 o'clock on that Friday afternoon, August 10th, Philomena's soul rose glorious and triumphant into heaven, where she received her reward, the crown of virginity, which she had won by so many victories. The Holy See does not guarantee the authenticity of this revelation, but that it was made known to three persons living far apart and entirely unknown to each other is indeed a strange coincidence. Also, it agrees with the emblems of martyrdom depicted on the tombstone of the saint. The printing of it received the sanction of the Holy Office on December 21st, 1833, so that as it has not been condemned by the Church, it can be accepted at its own worth, and devotion continued to the little wonder worker with restful minds. Saint Philomena, glorious Virgin and martyr wonder worker, pray for us. So that's a short little story of Saint Philomena, and I think a very nice one. And before we started this show, Ian and I talked a little bit about why is it, or questioned why it is that Saint Joseph and Saint Philomena are the patrons really of our times. And I think that we couldn't really agree as to why that is. But it's a beautiful thing that we have these two saints, and two very different saints. Saint Philomena is this very young teenage saint full of this incredible virtue and courage, and Saint Joseph, who is more of obviously this wise older saint. But the two things that, or I should say, the one thing that both of them are very, very well known for is their chastity and their purity. They're two of the more renowned saints for this virtue. And the fact that our times look to them, these two saints, more than any other saint, I think it really speaks to how important the virtue of chastity and purity is. And so I don't know, Ina, if you have anything else to say about Saint Philomena?
I always have to think when we were in Ars, where we saw the Curé d'Ars, where he lived, and he had a really big devotion to Saint Philomena. And in that church, there was this little side chapel that he had built for her. And I always see the picture in my head, like how the walls were like plastered with like crutches and stuff from like people, and like wheelchairs, and that people had left there, and this was very old, and that there had so many miracles had taken place there, and you could really see the visual reminder of that, and that was very impressive, like a very neat place.
Yeah, absolutely. And she is definitely known as a wonder worker, and we've had some prayers answered fairly miraculously by her, and some prayers that weren't. And that's just sometimes how it works. That I think you can't always assume that these saints, even the great wonder workers, they're not always going to give you what you want. Sometimes it means you have to wait for something, or sometimes simply what you want is not always what's best for you. I think that's a really important thing to remember, that just because you ask a saint, even if they're a wonder worker, just because you don't get what the wonder that you want doesn't mean that they are not effectual in their intercession with God. And Saint Philomena, of course, we know very well to be very effectual and very worth praise and honor, and worth your prayers to her. And kind of skipping to the next topic, the last few weeks have been pretty remarkable here in Germany for us in many different ways. We've had a lot going on recently. Most recently, we had the Bishop Pivrunas was able to make it over here with Father Borja for confirmations in France, in Germany, and in Italy. They pretty much traveled all of Western Europe in a 3-day time span. God bless them. It's unbelievable what they do to bring people the sacraments. And boy, we can never appreciate enough what the priests and what the bishops do for us and for our children. And I think we need that. There's another thing. Pray to Saint Philomena today and Saint John Vianney, whose feast was last week, for our priests and for the bishop who do so much and who get so little sleep for our sakes. But that was kind of the end, really, of an amazing 2 weeks that also saw a pilgrimage, which we'll speak a little bit about later. But the week started, I happened to have a week off of work because we're preparing for the pilgrimage and a music fest, which we do, which again, we'll talk about that in a minute. And it just happened that in the town where Father Heine's chapel is, and where our family, who's really our best friends here in Germany, had a absolutely catastrophic flash flood. It was pretty incredible. And I think maybe 1 hour, their entire basement was completely filled with water up until about 1 inch below the ceiling of the basement. So 1 inch to their floors. And they did get water running through some of their floors and through their garage. And that was a small problem. But the bigger problem was that their entire basement was completely flooded. Even until the next day, there was water up to the chest that was there actually until I think 3 or 4 days after the flooding. And unfortunately, they had many of their belongings in their basement. So this is their children's clothes, their books, their food. Much of their stuff was held down here. And you think, okay, things can dry, water just, gets into things, you can put it out in the sun. But the issue was they had a heating system that was run off of some sort of diesel-based oil. And unfortunately, the water got in there and the oil also escaped into the water and completely ruined all of their stuff. Almost nothing was rescuable or savable. It was all completely ruined. And from my experience of having gone down into the basement when the water was up to the chest, it was truly something from a nightmare and really, truly heartbreaking. And I know Ina and I both really ask now in this podcast to anyone listening, we're going to put a link to this video for a GoFundMe for this young family. They have 3 young kids. The oldest, I believe she's 6 now, 5 or 6. She's about to start school. They have 2 young boys and they have another baby on the way. So they're a very young family. They're the nicest, sweetest, best family that I know really here, that they're our best friends here. They're such a great family, and they really lost so much of their stuff and have a lot of work ahead of them in repairing. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, very expensive repairs, because when you have the oil in the house, it's just unbelievable, all the things you have to fix, and it probably take them years and just really high amounts of money. And they also don't have an insurance. So this is really like a hard strain on them.
And it's pretty incredible because the insurance, I mean, you think, okay, if you live right next to a river or something, sure, you get flooding insurance or whatnot, but they really don't. They live kind of near this little tiny creek, and it just happened that they're near this, they're in this little valley that comes down from the mountains, that it just a perfect scenario. It's a perfect storm, and it just brought all the water flooding down from the mountains and from the hills and right into their backyard. I mean, really could not have been a worst case scenario. And it's something you just can't prepare for. And now they're left, with thousands and thousands of euros worth of repairs, because they have to tear out the walls, they have to replace the walls, they have to, pump out the oil, all of this different stuff. And so we'd very much appreciate if anyone can contribute to this GoFundMe. That's again going to be linked in this video. Please share that as well. Share it to everyone you know. This is a family absolutely in need. It goes, obviously, of course, directly to them. They're going to use the money for buying new clothes and for repairing their home, which they need an entirely new heating system. We're already in the middle of August, so heating is not that far away. We're talking about a matter of maybe a month and a half before they need to start heating, maybe a month. So they need an entirely new heating system, which, of course, is going to cost thousands and thousands of euros. So please, any bit of money you can give, any shares would be hugely appreciated for this amazing Catholic family who really would give the shirt off their back for anyone else. So let's try to do the same for them. And on top of this story, I mean, something we really saw on the positive side from it was, I think Ina can attest to this too, is from this tragedy, we've really seen the best of people and the best of society come to the forefront. And it's been really a joy to see people come and help. And our friends, several of our friends, our guy friends here in Germany, we're going to go on a road trip to Italy, or I think maybe to Vienna, Austria. And instead of doing that, they ditched the whole thing and spent a good part of the week helping out in repairing the best that they can and drying things out. And that's just one example. There's so many different things that people donating. I think, Ina, you can speak a little more to that. People donating clothes, and what else have people been giving?
Yeah, there was like the whole moms in the area. There are some online groups and where this issue was brought up. And so they all stopped by and brought clothes and baby stuff that they didn't need anymore. And I think that was really amazing to see that there was such a big answer to this, and that people were so ready to give away things to people they don't know firsthand, but that they know were really in need. And there have also been businesses that we approached, and they were open to donate things not necessarily money, but just, for example, winter clothes, winter boots. And it was really I was really amazed to see how the people step up and they're ready to help, and how important it is that in such a case that there is a supporting society that takes care of their neighbor.
And that's exactly the next topic we want to get into. And again, please go and support them on the GoFundMe, which is on this video. The society and how important it is to have a support system, and especially a Catholic support system, a Catholic society. Christ said to let our light shine before men. And I think that the world tells us so often and so loudly that we need to shut up, go in our basements and just be quiet and not say a word and not live our faith, not express our faith, not be together. And you see that more now than ever during the Corona times, that they really don't want us together. They want us apart. They want us fighting, and they want us in any way. They don't want us to be together. And I think that's something we absolutely really have to fight in every way. Excuse me. And I mean that also in terms of temporal things. I mean, I think we literally just need to get together and have barbecues and have parties even, and be together and have a good time and live our lives. But more importantly is to live our faith and live it together, to be as openly as possible about our Catholicity, to be Catholics together. And I really got to see that this last, or 2 weeks ago now. We went on a pilgrimage to a shrine in Germany here, kind of near Munich. And it's Our Lady of Altötting. And it's a very ancient pilgrimage location that people have been going to since, I believe, the 1500s, maybe even the 1400s. It's very old and in a very effective pilgrimage place. You go there and you see there are plaques from the last 400 or 500 years of people's prayers being answered by Our Lady. And we even had, we started this last year, and we had 9 people go. And I think most of the people who went with specific intentions had them directly answered after the pilgrimage. So it's really been a beautiful thing to have witnessed.
Sometimes it's like a matter of days. Like I heard that this time too. And just amazing. Like coming back on Friday, and on Monday there's an answer to a prayer. I've heard that.
In a very specific and a very big prayer. This isn't like Our Lady of Altötting, please help me find my keys. You know, I mean, maybe someone said that too. I don't know, but this is very serious things, very important topics that were answered, as you say, within the next few days. And it shows you the importance of these things, of pilgrimages and being together in liturgy. And I think I need an entire podcast just talking about that, really. And maybe I'll have a priest on to talk about the importance of outward expression of our faith. But the pilgrimage is so beautiful, and it's something that is directly against what society and the Novus Ordo is trying to say. The Novus Ordo closed down their churches when there was a pandemic. But whatever you want to believe about the seriousness of the pandemic, if it is truly an epidemic or pandemic and many people are going to die, the last thing the church obviously should do is close their doors. The first thing they should do is go on a pilgrimage and ask God's forgiveness for the world's sins. The church very much believes that God punishes us for our sins as society, that he punishes, he does that through catastrophes, through, hurricanes or famine, or through pestilence, or through pandemics. And that being the case, we should go and suffer and go on pilgrimages and have pain and pray to God to forgive society and forgive the sins of the world. And that's something that I really think is not taken seriously enough. And I think that I highly encourage, truly, anyone listening to this, find somewhere you can go on a pilgrimage and do it. Organize it, set it up, and find a way to go on a pilgrimage and pray for your own intentions, and also for the reparation of sins committed through the world, and for God's forgiveness and mercy, that he forgives, all of our terrible, terrible issues of our society. And that brings up what I want to plan for next year. And this is kind of it's a very new, fresh idea. Really, it started, I think, maybe yesterday evening. So this is not something that's been thought out totally. This is more of a save the date. And the idea being, the dates are August 2nd through August 7th of 2022. And the idea is we're going to have an entire week of Catholic activities. So we're going to have a week where we all get together and do Catholic things together that ends eventually in a pilgrimage and a solemn high mass after the pilgrimage. And so the exact location is not yet to be determined. It'll be somewhere here in southern Germany. That's almost for sure. It'll be from the 2nd to the 7th of August. And some of the events will be arriving, having a barbecue, praying together the first night. Maybe the next day we'll have Holy Mass. We plan to have workshops being choir, singing, serving at the altar. Perhaps those who don't want to do any of that, they can go and make banners for the pilgrimage, which will be later in the week, which I think is going to be very nice. Maybe crucifixes for the pilgrimage that people can carry as we go on the pilgrimage to Our Lady. Thursday and Friday then would be a pilgrimage, perhaps 50 kilometers, so it's maybe 40 miles or so. It's a good stretch of the legs and a nice little way to feel a little bit of pain, have a little bit of suffering for our sins and for the prayers we want to be answered. And then Saturday evening, we'd have a music fest, which we've done now 3 years already here near Munich. And it's been very successful. That would be Saturday evening. And then Sunday, we would finish things off with a solemn high mass. And so that's the basic idea. We want people from all around the world, probably more likely Europe, but definitely from America, from Australia, from everywhere. Anywhere there are traditional Catholics, we want them to come together and be part of this week to grow. That's the main point. We want to grow together as Catholics. And they want us separated. The devil wants us apart. And we need to be together to grow. And that will be easier with more people and people from all sorts of different cultures and different places, because that helps us see how Catholic, how truly universal our faith is and how beautiful that is. And one of the things we also want to do, and this is going to kind of point us to the last topic of this podcast, is we want to do on Wednesday evening, after having in the morning, we'll have these workshops. We're going to have some seminars, hopefully given by priests who come from different countries, about the importance of Catholic marriage and relationships, and then follow that up with Catholic speed dating. And Ina, I don't know. I mean, when I first mentioned speed dating, what do you kind of think?
I think it does make you scared. Like you're just going to be matched up against your will, and you don't really have a say in the matter.
Right, exactly. And you think it's kind of this embarrassing.
Right. So there are a lot of bad prejudices against it, I think.
Right. And I think it sounds kind of shallow. It's like, how could I possibly get to know somebody in 1 minute or 30 seconds? And obviously, of course, that's true, and the point is not to, get you attracted to someone and then, you go and do some sort of worldly dating type of a thing. And that's something we want to talk about in this show. What should dating be? What should relationships be? And what are they now? And how can we help to facilitate and help to bring people together to give them more of a chance to find someone that could be their spouse for the future? And I think that's something that Ina has a lot of thoughts on it, and I have a lot of thoughts on it. We kind of have to think, how we want to get into this, but it really struck the two of us.
But also right, not just a chance, but also a choice, like that you can actually see this and this personality fits with mine, this and this character is that speaks to me, and actually to enlarge your options, instead of, it's not like so much like I'm so desperate I need this help. It's like I'm so set on wanting a good Catholic marriage, and I would like to pick rather between 40 people than between 2 that live in my parish.
That's perfectly said, and then that's what the church teaches too. If you look back, around Pius XII, and I tried to find these documents and I couldn't find them, but maybe I'll look again after the show and attach it to the show notes. But the church does teach that instead of quote unquote going steady, so having a long-term boyfriend, say in high school or shortly after high school, it's much better and it's much more recommended by the church to go on dates with many guys until you kind of get an idea of what you like and what you want. And then you find the right guy, and then you date him for a time, then you get engaged and you get married. And that's something that's really been lost. And it's something that I don't think our society quite understands.
Right. And That's also important, I think, because it keeps in two very natural things, which is like, I think for the men, the competition, they don't, especially in the beginning, shouldn't be too secure of that girl being theirs. Like they kind of have to conquer her and work for her, and they need to know that if they don't step up their game and get financially ready or mature enough, that there's probably going to be another guy who is, and who's going to like get that girl, snap it away in front of their eyes. So I think men naturally need that competition, and it doesn't work so well with them if they just feel pressured into, okay, I went out with this girl once and now I have to marry her. I think that inhibits even like falling in love with the girl, because they just don't feel like it's their own decision. And I think for girls, vice versa, I think it's also pretty good to talk to different guys, because just to not let their attachment get too strong too fast, because I think oftentimes when you get that undivided attention from a guy, someone's listening to you, like really giving you a lot of attention, then you instinctively like that guy, and it can happen that we as girls get too attached too fast. And I think that then oftentimes you want to have a cool head when you make these decisions. You want to see, is his personality, is it working well with mine? Is he financially ready? There are a lot of these things that you want to think about, that you want to do rationally before your heart is too involved. And I think if you're going out one night with one guy and the other night with another, and I mean, obviously this needs to be openly said and communicated, it takes out a bit of the pressure of like, okay, now we went on this first date, we're going to have to get married. And it also just kind of naturally lets you see how a guy is different. How do I converse with them? How do I just have like a playful good time by getting to know them, and which are like faults in a man that I could live with, and which are things that are really important, and that I really have to stress and what I'm looking for. And so I think that you want to have that natural feeling, and so I think it's a good thing to have your choice of good Catholic men, because I mean, oftentimes there are also people that wouldn't really have a problem to find a boyfriend or girlfriend, maybe in their sports club or in their school, university, but they're really set on finding a good Catholic one. And with that, I think the choices get a lot more narrow. And so you still want it to be natural, and you don't want to take out the competition for the man, and you don't want the girl to be too pressured into having to marry the guys straight away just because she's talking to him, figuring out if he would be a good match for her.
Right. And you make a really, really good point, that when we say that you should go on, say a date per night, the point being, it is very hard to do that when you're looking for a Catholic, because there just simply aren't that many Catholics. Now in America, it's a little more doable, but that's part of the reason why we want to do this week. And the week is not to set people up. That's really not the point of the week. The main point of the week we want is to get people to work together as Catholics and to build each other up and to be better Catholics. But yeah, sure. And a second point is to try to give people more of a chance to talk with Catholics and good Catholics from around the world, because they need that chance. If we want to say that people should talk to as many guys, women should talk to as many guys as possible, or several at least, then I think it's helpful when we give them that chance. And that's why I think this is a really important event, and why I think that as many people as possible should come, first of all, to help each other become better Catholics. Secondly, to give each other that chance to meet. If there are more people, there's more of a chance you're going to find the one, right? So I'd ask you, I think, what's the one word, if you could give one word, and we didn't prepare this before, so I'm putting you on the spot. one word for women and one word for men for the issues that they have with our modern dating. Why is it a problem for good Catholics to find a man or a woman? And give me the reason for the man and the woman. And if you can't right away, I'll give you mine.
I'd say I think for Catholics, I think I've seen this phenomenon even like a Catholic often thinks if they date another Catholic that they have to marry them right away. And so sometimes I saw Catholic men, dating someone from the world. And I think I could imagine it's a little bit of that. They don't have that same pressure that,
right,
they feel
pressure is your one word.
What's my one word?
Pressure.
Yeah. I think pressure is a lot of it, and fear, fear in many ways, fear of rejection, fear of not having your choice in it, or
Yeah, I think those are both good ones. And I would say, to add on to it, I don't know if these are necessarily the biggest, but to add on to your point, I'd say for women, it's being picky. Also for men sometimes, I think for men, it's oftentimes being not proactive enough. And that men often sit back and wait for things to happen when that's absolutely not how relationships should start or should work. The men need to be the ones who approach things. And I think sometimes women are too picky. And I think a lot of that goes hand in hand with what you said, is that fear, or that fear of having too much commitment, that, wow, if I say yes to a coffee, then, I'm saying yes to, I have to be in a committed relationship for the next, 2 years. And that's, I think, really part of the pickiness, that they are just afraid that if they say yes to a coffee, then, wow, there goes my future.
Right. And I mean, you have to see that way, that even if you don't keep going out with that guy, it's not like, it wasn't like a loss of your time. You can still have a good conversation, and there could be something that you learn about men or about the opposite gender in general, or you just learn that person, maybe that kind of character doesn't fit so much with you, or you probably would be looking more for a melancholic instead of a choleric, or vice versa. And so I think every time you can take something from it, and even if it's just like a natural way to converse with men, like everything needs practice. And so I think if you see it as a win either way, and if the expectations on both sides are clear, that first of all, if he asks you out on a dinner, it's mainly just, okay, we're going to have a good time and go out. And if not, we're still friendly after, but shouldn't be pressure. Like, let's just focus on having a good natural time tonight together.
Yeah, that's absolutely a good idea. And I think that has to begin with the men, and the men being willing to be manly. And that's one of the topics we want to talk about, and how manliness today is different than manliness, say, 70 years ago. And I think this really struck me, and I think it struck both of us. We recently watched the movie Roman Holiday with Gregory Peck and Audrey Hepburn, which, it's not perfect, but I think I can recommend it. It's clean enough that it's recommendable. And I mean, before we get into the relationship part, we have to say no, I'm not going to ruin it. Go watch the movie, and you'll be surprised by the ending. And if you watch the ending, you'll see very much how it is against everything modern, against everything that the modern media, the modern world is telling you to do and how to act. Sorry. But one of the things I really noticed, and we really noticed in it, is how different the relationships are and how they act differently. And I immediately noticed with both of them, and especially with him, I guess, I really immediately noticed literally how he stands in the movie, how he walks, and how he dresses. And it's so much more manly and masculine and confident than most of the people you see today. And it shows you that these outward signs absolutely make a difference. And it's absolutely for both genders too.
It's just it's like a nonverbal communication that like shows who we are, how masculine we are or feminine. There's a lot we communicate, even not just through words, but just about the way how we carry ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. And so for when you watch her in the movie, she's also the same, literally just physically. She dresses modestly, but she dresses very femininely. The way she walks is very feminine. She has a certain grace about her. And now she's famous for that. So she's hard to compare yourself to, obviously. And so is Gregory Peck. They're famous for being extremely masculine and extremely feminine. And so, but that's the ideal, right? And that's something that we've had conversations over the last week with a lot of people. And I think that it keeps coming up as the ideal. I think we're so prepared as people to be lazy and to be okay with the lowest that we can get away with, when what we should want is always the ideal. So if Gregory Peck is the ideal, or whoever, John Wayne is the ideal of masculinity, then why don't we aim for that? Why don't we aim to try to dress like Gregory Peck and like Audrey Hepburn, and to walk like Audrey Hepburn, and to act like Audrey Hepburn in this movie? And obviously, we as Catholics we need to go further, of course, and we need to be moral and good and Christ-like. But a lot of it begins in our outward forms.
Right. And I read this study once that the one thing that really was a common thing on happy marriage that it found, one of the reasons that they all had in common, and it wasn't like, as you would think, maybe a lot of common hobbies, a lot of common interests, same financial status or education, but it actually was the couples where the man said he felt most like a man and the woman said she really felt feminine. Those were the ones that had reported the happiest marriages. And I think, boy, that sounds really countercultural. Like our culture is always telling us, the women and the men, there's pretty much no difference between their roles. And that's not something we should want. And as women, we should want to be emancipated. But I think actually it hinders our happiness very often.
Totally. And I think that oftentimes women and men both hear these things like, oh, women shouldn't wear pants. Now, in my personal opinion, I think sometimes skirts and dresses can be just as immodest as pants. So that's not the issue with it in my mind. And I'm not telling women not to wear pants. That's totally not an argument I'm going to make right now. But I do think that pants just immediately do take away some of your femininity. They're not as feminine. They're not. They're what men wear. That's just absolute fact. You want to go cry about it, go cry about it. But that's the fact about it. And so if you really truly want to be the peak form of womanhood, and you want men to be attracted to you, and you want not even the attraction, but you want to set this example of being feminine, then you have to dress that way. And it's the same for men. Totally the same for men. And I am not a good example of how to dress. It's something I absolutely have to work on. I'm a terrible dresser, but it's something I need to work on, and I need to try to set that ideal too. Maybe I do need to wear more suit coats, maybe all the time. It sounds extreme, but why not? I mean, if I'm walking down the street in a tux, or not a tux, but in a suit coat, there's automatically more esteem for me, and I have more esteem for myself, and my wife has more esteem for me because I look masculine, and I look like I care.
Right. And it's kind of what we said before, like that it's part of that nonverbal communication, because it's also saying you are important enough, or your presence is important enough for me to dress up for it. Like I value that you're here that much, that I'm not just in my most comfortable state, but you're worth it, that I put some effort into how I look.
That's so true. And that's the case if you're married, or if you're dating, or if you're single, or, I mean, be the ideal. We are the ideal. As I started the show with, Christ wants us to be the light shining before men. We are the example. We should be the good in everything. We should be the ideal in everything. We should be the highest form of everything. And you know what? Sometimes that means more work. Sometimes it means discomfort. But if we do it, we're also happier, because the men feel that confidence, and because the women respect the men, and the men feel the respect. And when men feel the respect, they give women more of what the women want, which is being cherished. It's a cyclical thing. God made us this way. He made us so that men should be masculine and women should be feminine. That's how he made us. And that's how we need to try to act as best as we possibly can. And that brings up another topic of masculinity. Part of that is being dominant. The man should be more dominant. Now, this can be a touchy subject, and it can also, you have to handle it the right way, because a man also can't be over dominant. A man can't be a tyrant. In the family, when you get married, in the vows, the woman promises to obey the husband, and the man promises to cherish his wife. And so, unfortunately, I feel like what a lot of people hear, especially modern women, hear, all they hear is obey. That's the only word they hear in the entire vows. And it's unfair, because they think, oh, I'm not going to obey my husband. He can't just tell me what to do. And that's not the point, because they're counterbalancing. When in the vows they say she must obey and he must cherish and respect and love, it's saying that he cannot be a tyrannical dictator in the relationship. If he is, then that's also breaking his vow, because he's not cherishing and honoring his wife.
Exactly right.
And I think that it's a lie. It's a total lie of modern society that women want to be treated as men. It's a lie. It's absolutely against, not just against God, it's against nature. Women are built differently than men. They want different things than men. They thrive on different things than men. They're not lesser things. They're just different things. I mean, women aren't lesser than men. They're different. They crave different things. Men crave to be respected and to be the head. And women crave to be cherished and to be loved and to be taken care of.
Right. That's very true.
And I think that this fear of this word obey is exaggerated, and I think it's a shame, because it's one of the more beautiful things of it. Because excuse me, it's a big part of the Catholic family. The Catholic family is built much like the church, and you learn this when you take marriage lessons. And the church, say for example, the church has Christ as its head, and it has the Pope as the mouthpiece of Christ on earth. And then you have, from there's a hierarchy that goes down. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean, that the individual is necessarily greater or holier than the priests, say. There could be a holier priest than there is the Pope. But there's still that hierarchy. You have to have a hierarchy in society, in the church, in the military, at the job, and of course in the family. There has to be someone who eventually has the final decision. And this is something that the modern world absolutely doesn't agree with. And it's also why you see so many divorces many times, because there comes to be some big time decisions and they can't decide on it. And so, well, who gets the final say?
Right. And you see the same principle even in the secular world, like in any kind of company. You always are going to have a supervisor. Someone ultimately needs to have the final say. And I mean, also just from my perspective as a woman, I don't think I would be very happy with like a wavering, insecure man that wouldn't really know how to steer captain of a family and who would, come to me for all the decisions and stuff. Like, I appreciate, to have a strong leader. And the reality also is not that you marry a tyrant who goes and makes like 90% of the decisions in your life. I mean, usually, like you just perfectly said, if you cherish your wife, you're always going to look for her counsel, for her advice on things. And, oftentimes that it should be the woman is the heart of the family, and the man is the head. And because you do that, I mean, I don't know if I even can report an instant where, you were, did anything completely, had to say a final say that was against my will. But I can just only say that this takes off a burden off me to know, I have a manly man by my side who ultimately would have to make the decision, especially, on things that are hard decisions to make.
Right. And it's something that is harder on the men, and it sits on the men, but it's something the men can handle better than the women too. So again, that's how God made us, and that's okay. Women handle plenty of things much better than men. I mean, raising of children and taking care of a home and caring for the spiritual and the heart side of the family. Women are much better at that. The job of a mother is definitely debatably the most important in all the world. So there's nothing demeaning by saying that the men should handle that. That's how we are built, and that's how God made the family structure. And to say otherwise, and to say I'm not going to obey my husband is directly going against God and the church. And if you think otherwise, then go talk to a priest or read the catechism, because it's a dangerous thought to have. Now, I understand if people just don't quite understand it all, and they think, okay, I just have to obey and he tells me what to do. Yeah. So find a good husband, find a good man, find someone who is going to care for you and understands that, of course, it's a team. And men know that too. Tyrannical fathers and husbands are not happy ever. They're miserable. And so remember that too, as men, that even if you want the power and the control and you want the say in everything, if you don't have the respect of your wife and of your children, then you will never be happy, ever. And that's something to remember too, that the vows go both ways, and that's I think extremely important, and important to remember our roles. Going back to dating, the dating, it's so twisted these days that Ina said something really, really nice right before we started recording. And I think it was something like, there's a reason why there was certain etiquette back in the day. and why there were certain rules of society and certain rules of dress and how you ate and how you spoke. And there's certain rules from the church, right? And they're not, they don't hurt us, they help us. And,
Right.
and I mean, for example, I mean, as you said with the etiquette, if we followed this old etiquette, the old-fashioned etiquette, say from the 1940s or even from before that, say from the 1840s, it's not there to make us miserable, to make our lives harder. It's there because if you follow these rules, you're maybe more likely to find somebody or for things to work because they're set up in a way that men are men and women are women.
Right. And they just give you a guideline on how to behave, and that in return gives you security that you don't have to really break your head about, like the example, like dress etiquette. It's the same principle. When you work for a big business company and you have to wear a suit coat, I think many men appreciate that because they don't have to stand in front of their wardrobe every morning trying to think, okay, what would be a suitable outfit if I'm going to meet this and this customer. They're like, okay, it's fairly easy. I have a suit coat and a dress shirt and I know I'm well dressed, and it gives them that security and it frees their mind for other things. I think it's the same with eating etiquette and dating etiquette, and any kind of etiquette is mostly there to give us security and not to make our lives harder.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And I want to ask you two questions that a friend of mine asked me this weekend. I'm going to see what you say. Again, this is not prescriptive. So one question, the first question was, how do we get our generation more willing to make commitment? And that doesn't mean necessarily getting married. That literally means, how do we make them more willing to commit to, say, this week next year in Germany where we do this pilgrimage and the speed dating and whatnot? How do we help people to be more committal?
Right. Yeah, I think one of the issues is, and I know that because I've fallen for it myself, but you always want to keep your options open and you think maybe something better is going to come around the corner. And I think we have to realize that. And we have to realize that we put up inconvenience for other people that are planning these things, and that just simply need to know how many people are going to be showing up. And they need to know that not 2 days before, but the earlier the better. And if we raise the awareness of that our actions really matter and our words really matter, our commitment, if we say we come and people can rely on us, that is a really important, really good character trait.
Yeah, that's so true. And it's something that's so lost these days, is that being on time and being dependable, that you see why dependable people, they get a job and they have it for life, because so few people are actually dependable and just do their job, just show up on time and are there. I think that's maybe even more of an issue in America than it is in Germany, but it's very much an issue that if you just do what you're supposed to do, then it's really not a problem. And my answer to him when he asked, how do you make people more committed? I just say, kick him in the butt. I mean, I think sometimes people need a little tough love, and you say, hey, enough of your dilly dallying. Just tell me if you're coming or not, and figure it out, or you're not going to come. Because I think people are just they're so mamsy-pamsy these days. Everyone's too nice. Sometimes you just need to say, hey, enough. I'm sick of waiting for you. And you're either going to do it or you're not going to do it. And if you're not there, then, okay, we'll live without you. And I think that.
Right. And actually, it's funny because I was just reading the etiquette of the 50s. And one of the things was like, there was no way you were going to be late. Like you had to be on time. And this is also today, we have the technology to text someone 5 minutes before, okay, I'm going to be 15 minutes late. Back in the day, you didn't have that. So waiting 15 minutes would have been a lot more awkward than it is nowadays. And I think because we do have that technology, we have gotten a lot less committal than, for example, our grandparents' generation had to be. If they say we meet at the coffee shop at 3 p.m., you better be there, or it's really going to be not nice for someone else. And I think with all this flexibility, that's also how we have lost this strong commitment and to really rely on our word.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think that you bring up the easy forms of communication. Sorry. Man, oh man, it's darn cold. and how easy it is to talk to people and or to message people and whatnot. That's a whole nother topic, and the issue of that and what that has done to our dating world too, I think is absolutely catastrophic. And I think it's absolutely built it so that you can have these totally whelming, or no one needs to be active. You can just kind of like, oh, he sent me a smiley and I sent him a smiley, and then, oh, there's another smiley, and the smileys kind of progress to being slightly more flirtatious smileys. I mean, it's totally almost a joke. And when these things take a long time, especially with the men, and when you take too long, oftentimes the women just find someone else. And you know who they find? They find these confident guys, and oftentimes, very unfortunately, these confident guys are a bunch of losers. They're a bunch of losers who are these bad boys who have nothing going for them except for the fact that they have self-confidence. And so it's not like self-confident guys are always the best guys. Unfortunately, it tends to be the opposite. And so these natural,
right, you have to skim the man. Like, where does he draw his confidence from? Is it from being a good guy and being a good person to marry, or is it some sort of immature cockiness? And I think there's also a call to women. Like, for example, in this dating etiquette from the 50s, one of the points was that you were supposed to respond back as soon as possible if a guy asked you out. And I think that's a very respectful thing to do. Like, if a guy, does that, you don't leave him hanging, you give him an answer. And I think nowadays this can be very much an issue. If someone texts you and asks you that, you just don't feel the need to respond immediately. And I think it's a nice, classy thing that you do either way.
And so then I'll ask you the second question I was asked this weekend, and that was, how do we help men to have that necessary self-confidence?
Well, I think also an important thing for men to realize is that if they have the courage to go and ask out a girl, and even if the girl says no, because I think a lot of times they're just afraid of rejection, but even if the girl for whatever reason says no, she's not gonna go in her room afterwards and kind of laugh and think, oh, what a fool. Like, most of the time, and I've also asked other women this, like, they really respect the guy for having had the guts to walk up. Maybe not just the day after, but all their lives, they will think back and look with respect at this guy because, he wasn't afraid. He obviously must have thought he's a good enough guy to ask you out. And just ponder the opposite for a second too. If there's a guy that seems interested in you, but is always waiting for an extra sign or an encouragement and never quite directly asks you out, then possibly you just inadvertently have to think, okay, he must not feel very secure about himself. And I think any woman is looking like manly confidence. That is a trait that any woman wants. And also, what are the chances if he himself doesn't even think he'd be a good man for you to date or to marry, then why should you? And I don't mean this like or I think it's like a false trap or false humility. Sometimes the guy just thinks, okay, but I also don't want to be too cocky about myself. But I think that a guy should have the natural confidence and that should come from his desire to be a better man and to become a better man for the day when he gets married. And same goes for girls. We shouldn't just have this long list of things we want in a man. And if you are single, it's a good time to focus on and if you have the vocation to get married, it's better to focus on, am I a good enough person to be worth getting married to? And we are never perfect, but we should strive for it. Just as you said earlier on, we should have these high examples that we're striving for.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And I think that, right, to have this self-confidence doesn't mean you have to be this sanguine, happy-go-lucky, super cool guy wearing a leather jacket. I think that, unfortunately, that's what many, say, melancholics feel. That these people are much more introverted and they're quiet. And even if they're shy, if that's who you are, it's okay. You don't have to be somebody else. More of the point is, you've got to find that confidence in who you are, not who you think, not you being Brad Pitt, for goodness sake. It's you being you. Right. And you have to have that confidence in saying, I am a good enough person and I'm trying my best to be a good person, that I am able to be a good husband and a good man. That's all you need. You have to have the confidence in yourself, not in who you think a girl wants you to be.
Right. And exactly like you said earlier, there's a lot in a way, how a man stands, like you observed in that movie. And even as a melancholic, I mean, you don't have to go and be this loud, obnoxious, or flirtatious, have this flirtatious way to ask the girl out. You can do it in a very set, very quiet, very serious mode. But if your shoulders are straight and you're standing there confident in yourself, and you know that this is a compliment to the girl too if you ask her out, and if you have that air of security, then that can be very attractive. That is the way you are and how you ask someone out. There's no need to be loud and super bursting or sanguine about it.
So that's from the man's side. So exactly. So the man needs to be confident in himself and be proactive. If you think a girl is even vaguely interesting or attractive, go and talk to her. Period. End of story. Get the guts. Have confidence in who you are and do it. There's no excuse. I don't care what personality you are. Go and do it. Don't try to be someone else. Be yourself, but just go and talk to her. You're going to be really amazed at how often the girl's eyes are going to light up. Even if you're this totally introverted melancholic, they're going to be super happy you're talking to them. Yeah, maybe not always. Sure, that sometimes happens. But just because it doesn't work out once, then, doesn't mean everyone else. You just need to find the one girl. You know how many girls you're going to marry? I mean, God willing, one. So you need to find one girl. And sometimes it's not the first girl. Sometimes it's not the second girl. You got to keep trying sometimes. And that's just life. Now, on the flip side, from my opinion, for women, for goodness sake, don't be so willing to say no. I mean, if you're not attracted or you're not interested or he's a total bum, yeah, of course, there's always a reason that you can say no, and it makes total sense. But I really, truly get the feeling that women are way too ready to say no. And part of it's because of taste, because they're too picky in what they believe to be the perfect man. And part of it is exactly as you said at the beginning of the segment, was that they are too afraid that if they say, yes, I'm willing to dance with you or talk with you or go for a coffee with you, that means I am signing on to a long-term commitment.
Right. And there's a lot you can learn either way, just even understand how to have talks, relationships with the opposite sex, how to converse with them, and or even just how to get to know someone on a shorter time period and find out what is their temperament and stuff. And everything takes practice, and so does dating. And I mean, you probably want to have talked to a few guys at least to make an educated decision on who's going to be a good match and who's going to make a good husband for you.
Yeah, exactly. And you just don't know until you try. And so I think you have this issue that both sides, both the men and the women, have this issue that's taught to them by modern society that, whoa, don't commit. You just want to have as much fun as possible on your own, and you don't need to commit to anything. That's one of it. And the other one is that, yeah, you have this idea that if I talk to them, I'm committing to a everlasting, relationship with them. And the other one being, they're just simply scared. And that's got to start with the men, because I truly firmly believe that most relationships should start with a man doing the starting. Now, of course, sometimes it's different. I get that, but the ideal is the man should go and talk to the woman, and that's how it's meant to be, and that's how it should be. And then the woman should let the man talk to her, even if she doesn't think, hey, this guy is my future husband. How do you know? For goodness sake, how do you know? Do you know them? Who they are? Do you know their hearts and their souls? I mean, I know some of these guys, my good friends, who are they're much more shy than me. That they're melancholic or they're introverted. And so I think they don't have the guts sometimes to talk to girls. And I think sometimes they've been turned down by girls, and they are way better people than I am. I mean, they're way better guys. They're harder workers. They're more holy. They're people who want to spend time in church, etc. And so if you don't talk to them, how will you ever know that? And you're just judging them based on their first impression of, oh, they're not super sanguine. And that's another thing that I think we're meant to believe, that every guy has to be the super sanguine Brad Pitt. It's not life. That's not reality. And I think we need to grow up from that and realize that there are super good people around.
There are many guys that look for more of a deep, thoughtful, melancholic. And you just need to find those girls, or you need to get over that initial barrier of actually meeting them.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And of course, all of this should be prefaced. It should all be prefaced with saying that, honestly, men and women should not have anything to do with the dating sphere until they are ready to be married. That's also the teaching of the church, and it's very practical. So I can't say much. I was dating when I was in high school because I'm an idiot. Okay. So I'm totally being, a hypocrite right now. So do what I say, not what I do. But the church says you should not date, and it's very practical. You should not date or be in this world until you're ready to care for a family. Why is that? Because, well, if you're dating, you're clearly looking, or should be looking, for your future spouse. That's the whole point. The point is not what the world tells us, that, hey, you want to have fun. You want to go, get physical with someone. Of course, that's exactly the opposite of what we want right now. You want to get married. You want to find someone to spend your life with, to reach eternity with, and to have children with. That's the whole point. And so you should not be in this arena at all if you're not ready for that, especially for the men. The men have to be financially ready to care for a family, or definitely should be, before they even think about asking a girl out. So keep that in mind. When we say all of this and say that, you need to be confident, etc., you do have to be actually ready to support someone before you get seriously, and go ask someone to go on a date with you. Because otherwise, you go on a date and you get serious and she likes you a lot, and then, we have to date for the next 5 years because, he's not ready. And I think that is also a major problem. On the flip side, I think that oftentimes relationships and marriages are put on hold for bad reasons. And I think that's something that that people need to think about also, that don't delay saying yes to coffee or saying yes even to a marriage proposal for reasons that aren't good enough.
Right. Very good points. Yeah. And I think also, to make conversation easier between men and women, I think one thing that we both observed, for example, in the movie we recently watched, there was a very different way on how the female heroine received a compliment. And I think there is an art to how to do that. And I think it's crucial that you do not make it awkward or downplay the compliment. And you also don't always, I think many people think they have to search desperately for some half-hearted compliment in return. But what you really should keep in mind, that if someone gives you a compliment, it's like a kind gift, and turning down a gift insults the person giving it. Like, you don't value them enough as they value you. If he says your outfit looks really good and you're like, oh, this whole thing, I've had it for years, then you kind of either saying, okay, you really don't have a good taste, or, they're just not very observant. And so I think if you just know how to say thank you and I appreciate your kind words, and then you can show gratitude for the woman in a feminine way, or you reward them with a big, generous smile. And there was this one scene in the movie too where one of the guys, he was going to, Audrey Hepburn, who was like the princess in disguise, like as a normal girl, and he was saying, if you come to this dance tonight, you'd be the most beautiful woman of all the women there. And instead of her just turning awkwardly away, she gave him this like huge winning smile, and in the sweetest and most decent voice just said thank you. And I think as we said earlier, again, we need to be mindful of our non-verbal behavior. We don't do this with crossed arms, downcast eyes, or any overly casual posture, because that would send the wrong message or indicate disinterest. And we can just, like, for example, the way to receive a compliment properly, you lean slightly forward, you look the giver in the eyes as you smile, and you say thank you. And this will make them feel good.
And a really important side note to this was that the guy who said this was not a romantic interest for her at all. He's totally a side character. I asked her, he was interested in her, but she was simply just being nice. She was not in love with this guy or anything. That's part of that too. Just because someone pays a compliment doesn't mean you saying thank you and smiling means that, yeah, I love you too. So again, it's this fear of commitment of you just think, oh, someone said something nice. Oh my goodness. What do I do? Just like you say, there should be this etiquette that returns. Men should dress nicely. Women should dress nicely. And as you say, And on the flip side, men should pay more compliments. I mean, so it's and if we do this, if we try to live to this ideal and say, why can't we be Audrey Hepburn and Gregory Peck? And if we try to do that, we will lift all boats. As they say, what do they say, that a rising tide lifts all boats. So I mean, if we do it, the people around us will also raise their game. That is absolutely how it works in nature and in society. So if we step up our game, if we dress very nicely every time we go to Mass, then first of all, we're honoring God, which is the most important. And secondly, those around us are going to say, wow, they take that very seriously. Maybe I should too. And that's, again, it's a whole other topic, which I could talk about for 3 hours, about how important it is and how we behave in church and in our dress and the importance of liturgy. But it also goes totally hand in hand with relationships. And it's something that, look at the changes in the 1960s. The changes at Vatican II in the Novus Ordo were exactly parallel with the changes in society. You had this change of society, which changed in 10 years, 20 max, where you went from having a society that had really firm morals and things you could not do in public to this sexual revolution. And it happened, similar things happened in the church where they had all of these rules and it changed to, open whatever you want to do. And there's a reason for that. They go hand in hand. And I listened to a great sermon by Bishop Sanborn that talked about how the Catholic Church was invaded for hundreds of years through their theology. And eventually, they fought it back, and they had bad times, but they fought, and the Catholic Church remained. And then finally, they tore it down, at least in its form. Of course, the Catholic Church remains, but they tore down Rome and the hierarchy through the liturgy. They have had 90% of Catholics around the world abandon their religion because they destroyed the sights and the sounds. And that is the same with relationships. The modern world tore down the etiquette, the sights and the sounds, how you stand, how you dress, how you talk. And through that, they've ruined relationships. They're totally parallel. And I think if we realize that, we realize the issues, and we see we need to go back to how it was in this form, not everything, obviously, but in terms of how we act, then I think it's such a good start. And it starts with us. And I think we need to start right now. And I think that we're going to see amazing changes if we start acting differently, if men find that within themselves to be the leaders of whatever they need to be. No matter your personality, you are the one picking up the rope, the slack. You are the one who needs to lead your siblings or your family or your parish. We have to do that, and we have to pick that up. And women have to let us and to help us and support us and be there for us in doing so, because obviously it's a team effort.
Right. And also coming back to what you said earlier, like how chastity, how important it is. I think that was another astonishing thing that we kind of noticed in the movie, like how different the manliness was portrayed. Like back then, it was definitely seen as manly, to be in control of your passions, to not like make use of an occasion where he could, easily sway over the girl, because in this movie she had a sleeping pill that made her feel kind of tipsy, and he still was all gentleman and everything. And we saw this in a couple of the old movies, and our modern day society tells us, okay, really, if you are in control of your passions and if you are this strong-willed man who's still a virgin, then you're a loser. And this is like so absurd, like that the devil was able to twist it just the other way around, and like to make it seem attractive that a man who just pretty much is like a dog following his passions is what men should want to be, is just mind-boggling, I think, because that is not appealing at all.
Absolutely.
Right.
And you see again how it all adds to the eventual higher form of manliness. You see that in this film, and in another one, like we watched the Cinderella film and with Yul Brynner, And that kind of comes into also the conversation of dominance and male dominance. And in that movie, it's a little extreme. He's extremely dominant, but
right. The Anastasia movie, right?
Anastasia, yeah, right.
Right.
And it's not all bad, right?
It was kind of refreshing in a way, because you don't see a man who knows his mind as strong anymore, and who has his passions in check at the same time, and is very controlled and has opportunities for sin but doesn't make use of them. And the funny thing is, like, you look at the modern day cartoon Anastasia, and it's really subversive and not that obvious. But if you really just look at it for what it is, like, the role of the man in that cartoon is very different to the old black and white movie. Like, there are a lot of scenes that kind of that portray him as a little bit of a loser. Like, it's really small things. Like, he falls off the horse and in the mud while she gracefully jumps over the obstacles with her horse. Or in this train accident, she has to save the day when they are climbing outside on the train, and she finds the explosive to disconnect themselves from the other part of the train that's gone kind of wild. And you really see, like, I think maybe you say it's slightly and it's subtle, but modern day media really attacks the man and the role of the man as like a strong,
it's so true.
Yeah,
and it's so true, and it's so sad, because if you look again, say Roman Holiday, she is absolutely, especially if you watch till the end, I would recommend everyone, I'm not going to ruin it for everyone, but watch the end and you see how she is the heroine, and you see why. But the whole time, and he's not this perfect guy either, and that's part of the storyline, that he's kind of this, you watch the movie, he's kind of this corrupt guy. But anyway, his manliness and his good decisions and his character arc, his becoming better in the storyline, it doesn't affect her storyline negatively. So it's like the modern movies try to make it so that the women can only succeed if the men don't, and it's totally bonkers.
Right.
But anyway, that's a whole nother podcast. We're going to have to do a podcast, you and I, about modern media and about Disney and about how they truly try to warp the minds of children and try to turn society backwards, and in many ways have. But now we're already about an hour 20 in. I think what we said before this, like, yeah, we'll do like 30-minute podcast. Well, that didn't happen. But I hope that it was. I think it was a very interesting topic, and I think it's one that we could talk about for hours on end, and we have. We would love to hear people's feedback. I mean, tell us something you think we said wrong. Tell us, what you agree with, what you disagree with. If you have any real marital issues or relationship issues, talk to a priest. We are not, technically experts in this. Obviously, we've just been married for 3 years today. So we're also new to this ourselves, but we're just giving and expressing our opinions, which obviously could also be wrong.
Right. And as we said in the beginning, like you and I, before we were on the podcast, there's always two sides to a thing. There are two extremes. And everyone like us, also, we see certain problems, or we ourselves had certain problems. And so we always think this is where people, what people need to talk about. But it's very possible that someone just experienced problems at the other extreme. And so this is just our view and things we have observed, but we would be very interested to hear, what are some of the issues that you see in modern dating, or where people really need to fix their behavior.
For sure. And again, a reminder that the GoFundMe page for the family who suffered from that flood will be attached to this video. And also that to save the dates from August 2nd to August 7th, that's next year. Much more details coming in the next few weeks regarding that. But it'll be a week again where we try to get together as Catholics and help each other grow as Catholics, with a little bit of dating in between. But married people are welcome. This is not only a singles retreat. So married people are definitely welcome. There will just be some events where single people can try to get to know other single people a little bit better. So, Ina, thank you very much. I think it's time for us to go and figure out our anniversary dinner. But I appreciate you coming on, and it was a lot of fun. And I hope that people enjoyed this, and we'll have to do it again in the future. So till next time, until the next 30 seconds when I see you in the other room, everyone listening, God bless.
God bless.
You've been listening to the Catholic Family Podcast. If you enjoyed this show, Please share it with your friends and family. You can support the production on Patreon and PayPal, and you can reach Kevin at kevin89davis@gmail.com. Ad maiorem Dei Gloriam, all for the greater glory of God.